This is WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul. You are listening to One Human Nation with your host, Sandy Batiste. This program will be talking about race and race relations in your community and nationally. Our goal is to be open, honest, and productive.
Welcome to the One Human Nation show. I'm your host, Sandy Batiste, and the purpose of this show is to provide a safe, honest, open, and productive environment so that we can learn and share in our stories about race in the United States. The viewpoints expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of WRUU, its license holder, or its staff. So thanks for tuning in, and we're going to talk about this explicit association test. I mentioned on last week's show that I was going to make a point of retaking the test that's associated with how it relates to race as far as Black people and white people. If you've been to the website onehumannation.info, this is where you can click on the link that will get you to the implicit association test website. And they have a variety of different types of tests that you can take because this show is related to race and racism in this country. I focus specifically on the ones that relate to that. So the last time I took this test was probably, I think, about a year ago when I was living in Austin, Texas. And so the demographics, and I've been in Austin for, 30 years plus, and moved back to Savannah last year around November or so. So when I took the test last year, what it is suggested at the time is that I had a slight preference for African Americans over European Americans. And if you're asking, why should I care about my implicit association test score, it's intended to help predict behavior, especially if you're in roles where you're in a position to hire for promotion, if you're in the medical field, and decisions related to criminal justice. Remember, this show is all about looking at your internal culture. We try very hard to embrace an environment where you're not judging each other. It's about looking at your internal culture and what are the things about your internal environment, how you grew up, what you were exposed to, and how does that relate to where you are today. It's not about judgment. And part of telling the story is making sure that when you're telling your story, you're using your I voice. And remember, they're not any subject experts where we talk about, in order to be on the One Human Nation show, you've got to be an expert in this particular area. We want everyone to feel comfortable in sharing their story. In one of our communication agreements that we use in the One Human Race initiative, and these are a series of workshops that really get into the whole race conversation and the history of race in this country, and it talks about how to take care of yourself and to stay engaged and to be aware of your reactions and your responses. And there's this wonderful part of this statement that was created by someone that was very involved in these workshops. And basically she said the divine can be found in the tension. So as you listen to the show today and as you listen to the stories, because we do have a guest speaker that's going to be coming on in about 15 minutes or so, it's really about, taking a look at what was said that resonated with you, that spoke to you in a way that may have made you feel uncomfortable, may have made you feel tension, and may also prompt you to tell your story. And if you want to share your story, send me an email at mystory@onehumannation.info. Again, that email address is mystory@onehumannation.info. So getting back to the implicit association test, I just kind of want to give us a little reference point, a little background. So when I tell you what my results were, you won't go, oh, I should have known. So, and again, if you did, it's not about judgment. It's really about figuring out where we are on our personal journey. So the results, when I took this today, was your data suggests a strong automatic preference for African Americans over European Americans. When I took this test last year, it basically said your data suggests a slight preference for African Americans over European Americans. Now, you can make of that what you will, slight as opposed to strong preference now. The demographics in Austin, totally different from Savannah. And when you take a look at this information, they'll also give you the percent of web respondents with each score. So it will tell you the strong automatic preference for European Americans compared to African American. There was a 24% preference. Moderate automatic preference for European American compared to African American, 27%. Slight automatic preference for European American compared to African American, 17%. And it goes, kind of breaks everything down. So for me, I'm not surprised. I am African American. I had someone else take this test, and she's African American, and she didn't have a preference one way or the other. As far as what the implicit association test revealed, but again, it's your story. It's what does that say about you as far as do you have a preference if you're in positions where you have that authority to hire? Are you making some decisions based on an unconscious bias? And that's where we can run into trouble. It's when we don't realize that we have a bias and it turns out to be a negative. So I'll give you an example today of something that occurred this week, and it was reference to how we make decisions based on the sound of someone's voice, based on determining, can you identify over the phone whether that person was white or black. And it's not necessarily that you can even identify that from their name, because sometimes when you hear a name, and we've talked about that before on the show, you automatically make an assumption of what that person's ethnicity is. And sometimes it comes with an unconscious bias that you're going to say, oh, this person is XYZ, and you're not going to engage with them for whatever reason and whatever you're doing because of that preference. Well, what came up today was this week when I mentioned to a young black male professional on the show. I said, well, I host a show because, of course, now I tell everybody just so I can get the word out there and people can listen in. What it was about. And he says, oh, we were just talking about this at work. And I said, really? He said, yeah, we were talking about it at work. And I was mentioning to one of the gentlemen that works with him, who happened to be white, that his skin color did matter, because he went on an appointment this week and he'd been talking to the potential customer over the phone. But when he got to the door, they would not let him in because he was black. So this is this week. This is if you're still living in that bubble, and our truth is in our bubble. If you're still living in that bubble that, all of that happened a long time ago, We're talking about this week in 2017. If you're still in that bubble, I mean, and you haven't looked at anything based on what's on the news or read the newspaper, and it doesn't matter to me what your politics are. It's about being awake and aware. So I found that to be, interesting that even as of this week, and I'm not surprised. So, I shared with him some of the same experiences that I have, in Austin, in reference to people not being able to tell over the phone whether, I was black or white. And then at the point of time where they needed to make that connection to actually do business, and I was a mortgage lender, they would make a decision based on the color of my skin. And it gets to be obvious when someone, I didn't have the door literally slammed in my face, but when you don't have your phone calls returned because somebody went to your website and then they saw that you were African American, the excuses that come out when you do follow up with them, because after a while you just kind of get to that point of, okay, let me just see what story they're going to tell me, what's going to be the excuse of why they didn't complete their mortgage application or whatever it is. Now, it was obvious for this gentleman of what the reason was, because they just flat out refused to let him in, and they pretty much told him the reason why. So we're going to have a guest today that's going to be talking to you about some of their experiences based on, where they grew up and the perception of where they grew up, some of their experiences, not only growing up, but also we try to get the full story, at different times in someone's life based on what they're willing to share. Because again, this is about what you feel comfortable in sharing. This is not to be a gotcha moment where I'm trying to, trick you into saying something that's going to alienate you with your family, or you don't get an invitation to the family reunion because of something you said on the radio or felt like you were tricked into saying. It's about having a safe, honest, open, and productive dialogue so we can all learn, we can listen, we can find the common denominator. And sometimes in the listening, there is the tension, there is the discomfort. I encourage you to take the implicit association test just to see, what do you have an unconscious bias? Are you aware of an unconscious bias? There is another one on that website that I'm going to take. Hopefully I'll get it done before the show next week. And it's in reference to having a preference to the color of skin tone, whether light skin or dark skin, because that in itself is a whole nother issue as far as how we make decisions about people, assumptions about people based on the color of their skin. How do you determine, whether someone is black or white, or if trying to figure out what bucket do we fit in? And I think some of that is just natural human behavior. The problem is if it creates a negative impact on that person because you're making a negative judgment based on a stereotype. So when you start thinking about your internal culture, I do encourage you to take a look at the website, onehumannation.info. Posted there is the picture of the iceberg culture. And we encourage you to take a look at that, to really come familiar with what's the external things that you see and make judgments about. And we do it all the time. It could be food, flags, festivals, holidays, fashion, language, literature, dance, music. And the guest today is going to talk about, kind of some of their experience from a music perspective. And then deep culture, what's underneath the iceberg, what's really driving that iceberg along. And it's everything from our communication styles, our notions of things like courtesy and manners, our concepts of everything from self and time. And I think that's our caller calling in. So we're going to take a short break and we'll be right back with One Human Nation.
for joining the One Human Nation show today. And I know you're calling us from Austin, the ATX area, so it's always interesting since we're now like an hour difference in time. So I appreciate you taking the time out to give us a phone call and to share your story and stories with us. So give us an idea about, where you grew up and what stories you had or didn't hear about race, specifically towards African Americans, or really any other person of color as you were growing up.
Sure. Yeah. Well, hi, everyone. I grew up in the suburb of Massachusetts, suburb of Boston, Needham, Massachusetts, and I grew up in the 60s and early 70s. It was a predominantly white suburb, relatively, middle class to upper middle class. There's a pretty broad spectrum of incomes, and but it was a predominantly white suburb, and I grew up. I guess my experience with race was probably through education. Is known for having a pretty good education system, and there's a lot of emphasis on history. So we learned all the things that you typically learn about the Civil Rights era, the Civil War, all of the kind of touch points in our nation's history where race is a factor, and in fact, that's probably every part of our history. So I got a good education. Of course, as we all know, there's a lot of things that are not taught in our public schools. So, but I did have some black friends in school. So my experience was, really primarily, again, through education and through popular culture. And so I would say it wasn't really until I went to college where my world really started expanding. And at that point, as somebody who was interested in music, I always loved the blues. I started learning about jazz, and when I was, I guess in high school, and it wasn't something that my family was really involved in. It just happened that there were, I had my Jimi Hendrix records and my B.B. King records, and that was the stuff that I just really loved. And my parents listened to PBS, and we listened to all kinds of music, and so I did get some influence from what they did and what they listened to. And so when I got to college, my first year, I went to a school in Ohio, Hiram College, and it wasn't really until I transferred in my sophomore year to UMass, University of Massachusetts Amherst, where I think my world really started expanding. And so yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so how did you get involved with that? That genre of music and blues, if that's not something that
Well, my brother did have some records. He had some Coltrane records, and I think it was just something that I just understood. And as soon as I heard that kind of music, it was just something I immediately identified with. And so yeah, it wasn't like I was being taken out to blues clubs or anything like that. I just loved the music, and my older brother, who is a musician himself and plays all kinds of music, will tell me that when I was a really little kid, I used to go around the house saying, solid jazz and stuff like that. So I picked up on the stuff that I heard. Sometimes I would watch it on TV, that was just me. I just soaked it up. And as a matter of fact, when I was transferring to Mass, I looked through the course catalog and I saw the African American Music Ensemble, and I had been playing the trumpet for a little while, and I had done some singing, but I hadn't really done a whole lot of singing. So, but that I just looked at that and I said, that is something I want to get involved in. I don't know whatever it's going to take. That I want to be in that group, and in fact, that's what happened. And UMass Amherst has a really rich tradition and history of African American education and culture and music, and there are so many musicians that taught there, and Max Roach, Yusef Lateef. So it was just a great place to be. It was a really, really great time to be there as well. Yes. Well, when I was in elementary school and middle school, I was called names. I mean, I was sort of singled out, different, and there were some reasons for that. I imagine. I didn't really fit sort of the macho mold of other kids, other boys especially, but I was called the N-word, and that was something I wasn't prepared for. And it had to do. It had to do with and this is just something I was called lips, or angel lips, if you will. And it was just something that I found really to be strange, and I tried to kind of figure out. First of all, it was an insult, and it made me feel very uncomfortable, and it made me feel singled out, and that was probably my first experience being singled out for an aspect of my appearance. I was also, and I am, hearing impaired. But at the time, I didn't wear hearing aids. That was before I got those, and so I was really. I think that was something that sort of formed my experience of that. Maybe this sort of mainstream world I'm in is not the only world there is, or there's something a little bit off, and I had to figure out what's here and get to the bottom of this and see where I fit in. And so and then of course as I started, when I got to college, I studied literature of the Harlem Renaissance, and I studied jazz and other kinds of African American music, and I got a pretty good education there as well, and started to really have my eyes opened, and so that helped kind of look back on that experience and see it as interesting and strange, and maybe helping to form my identity a little more.
Okay, so part of it is trying to figure out.
I want to make sure that I'm coming across to everyone. But so part of the experience that you had mentioned that you were hearing impaired. You mentioned that people made fun of you because of your physical appearance. So I got to ask, because the listeners are probably wondering what part of your physical appearance, warranted you getting called the N-word.
Well, it was my lips.
Okay.
And apparently, perhaps, maybe they were large in proportion to my face. I don't know. It was just something that, when you are the way you are and you're born that way and you can't change it,
right?
People start singling you out for something. Your first thought is, after trying to purse your lips. My wife tells me she used to try to pinch her nose up. That, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But, I would try to figure out, can I purse my lips? Can I, and of course, after like an hour of trying to do that, you realize it's not something I can change. So,
right.
So you try to change the way that you react to the way somebody is treating you, and that can have all kinds of consequences, like getting beaten up and all that kind of stuff.
So, I know a little about your history because obviously I know you since, we attended the same church in Austin. And so I also know that you're currently married to an African-American person. So how did that all happen?
Sure. Well, so after college, I was out working, doing various different things. I got an opportunity to become an assistant teacher. So I was working in a school in Boston, and it was a school that has a multidisciplinary set of programs, and one of them was this vocational program that I was working in, and I had cafeteria duty, and my wife had cafeteria duty as well. She's a nurse, and she was working there for sort of taking some time out from her nursing and working as a health educator in the school. So we both sort of got put there, and she'll tell me that her mother, who passed away when she was young, when she was in college, she says her mother put us together. So that to me that is I think that's got to be true. So because it's the best thing that happened to me, certainly. But we got to know each other. We had cafeteria duty together where we had to stand there and tell kids, sit down, wait till you hear the bell, take your hat off, turn off the radio. That's back when kids had, boom boxes.
Right.
So they, we had to tell them to turn the radio off, sit down, wait till you hear the bell before lunch is over. And we were sort of there. We bonded together, and, I fell in love instantly. So that's how we.
So, yeah.
On time. And
I'm sorry. You were getting ready to say something else? I'm getting a little feedback on my end, so it's kind of strange. So hopefully the listeners are not hearing that.
This portion of WRUU-LP Savannah Soundings programming is made possible by a grant from Sentient Bean, offering fair trade coffee, vegan and vegetarian food, and breakfast all day. Located at 13 East Park Avenue, across the street from the tennis courts at Forsyth Park. Our menu and special events listings can be found at sentientbean.com.
I can, yeah.
And as far as his experiences growing up and being involved in the music world, and one of the things that the guest speaker last week had mentioned was how music was like a universal language, that there was something about listening to music. It didn't matter whether, and that's Brian again, bless his heart. Hold on one second.
It's funny, I was nervous about doing the call, but now, now I really want to get my story out there. Like, no, you're not going to cut me off.
I know. So it's like this thing.
Yeah.
There's something going on that
Yeah. Well, don't sweat it. I work from home, and we have calls where there are technical difficulties almost every day, and we use this conferencing software that everyone loves to hate. So I'm used to it, I guess. I'm glad you have some really good music.
So
yeah, it's good to listen to Joe. So we're back on the air, and
I'm just trying to double check and make sure that everything is moving the way it should be moving. So, Brian, I do apologize because
that's
I know you're like right in the middle of getting ready to get your story out, and it's a good story. So, it's nothing personal here, but it's like,
no,
yeah. So,
I'll be
um,
back.
okay. So, share with us, what decisions did you and your wife make as far as when you having children and your daughter got to be older, what kind of stories, if any, did you talk to her about as far as race?
Well, the first interesting thing is that our daughter is adopted, and
Okay.
we went for a few years. We adopted her at birth, and she is mixed race, just like us. And so we went for a few years struggling with the question about how do we tell her she's adopted. So that
Okay.
was sort of like the first order of business. And, we were really apprehensive about that. We read books. We consulted with people. And one of our best friends said, look, it's just don't make a big deal about it. Just tell her. And if you're not going to tell her, I will. And of course, that was, and I had no doubt that he would do that. So I know he was sort of half joking, but so, we had that conversation, and that went really well. And so, but we have talked with her about her history, and we haven't really, said, look, we're going to sit down and have the talk about
Right.
how you need to act, and that quote unquote the talk.
Right.
And I think that we may really need to do that too. But she's a very confident and strong person, and so it's sort of a continuing conversation. I feel like she's got a really good sense of self, and I'm not really at all worried about her feeling confused about being from mixed parentage, and I just feel like she's got a really great future.
Good.
And so, this is, it's easier now. Mixed race families or mixed families, blended families are all over the place, and on TV and at school and at church. So,
Right.
so I hope it's easier for her now than maybe it was in decades past.
Right. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And, Austin is a little different when it comes to that. But I'm sure if there's anything going on, she'll definitely let you know about it. The other part that I just wanted to touch base on, if you can share with us, I know you participated in the One Human Race series there in Austin. So can you share with us what that experience was like for you, and what insights did you gain from that, if any?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I gained a lot. I gained a tremendous amount. It was a great experience, and it was a really good time. I had joined St. James, and I knew about the church's history as being by students at Houston Tillotson, black students allowed to attend an Episcopal church in town. So, but then going on to make the church inclusive, the very sorts of people that they might have thought were discriminating against them, therefore making a really inclusive, welcoming church.
Oh, yeah,
So,
not so much the church, but actually,
that was sort of that's the context for. I guess I just wanted to talk about that because that's how I came to learn about One Human Race.
Oh, okay.
And the funny thing is, about a year before I found out about One Human Race, and the title of it was Refuting Race. And I had this really sort of naive idea that I was going to write this book about, the concept or the myth of race from I was going to cite scientific literature, or science and philosophy, and sort of put out the idea that race was just a construct and it wasn't a real scientific fact. But I have a lot of in that other than of where I had come from and what I understood. I knew that was the truth, but I didn't really have the history or the research at my fingertips, and I didn't get very much farther than writing the introduction to the book. But along came One Human Race, and it didn't just affirm my understanding; it really expanded on it, and it did it of a group of people where we could talk freely. And I learned a tremendous amount from watching the PBS series, the Race, the Power
of an Illusion. Race,
exactly,
the Power of Illusion, right.
And I mean, there's always so much to learn, and there's so much of a need for scholarship and understanding and learning about our history. There's so much more, even if the schools could teach a lot more, even if there weren't any political agendas to restrict where we or a cultural lens to sort of limit what you find out. There's always so much more to learn, and this was a really tremendous experience.
Well,
I learned a lot from the program. I learned a lot from the discussions, and it was a great opportunity to connect with other people.
Great. So
and,
I'm taking a
and
look
to
at,
help serve people as well.
Yeah, and I think that's what really is the driving initiative behind the One Human Nation radio show, is that if we can just all feel comfortable in telling our stories, we'll find that we have a lot more in common than what we have different. But we are just entrenched in what we see and what we hear, and we all have some bias in some form or the other, and it can be harmful and painful when it's an unconscious bias, and it's about having the ability to go through a process where we can get through reconciliation, where we can get through healing, so we can get to justice. So I do appreciate you sharing your time today, and I do apologize for the technical difficulties. As we wrap up with you, Brian, are there any additional thoughts you want to share?
Well, it was a real joy to be talking with you today and to be able to tell a little bit of my story. And I just really enjoyed connecting with you through One Human Race. I think that it's the kind of program that this country needs a lot more of. And this, you're doing this radio show is just an extension of that. And whenever you can connect with somebody and do it on the basis of mutual understanding, right, and the idea that nobody is a subject matter expert, everyone has something to learn and share, and we can go forward helping each other and connecting and finding out how we're really all the same. There is one human race.
One human race, right.
Yeah.
So
it's great. So I really enjoyed this opportunity.
Well, thank you. And, I hate saying goodbye, so I'll just say until we meet again.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Take care, Brian.
Yeah. You too, Sandy.
And we're back with One Human Nation. And I could hear Brian, I guess his dog was also letting us know that it was time for us to end the conversation. I do want to share with you that if you are a business, if you enjoy our programming on WRUU-LP, please support the station with a donation. Let your customers, neighbors, and friends know that you share our vision of building a thriving community based on diverse, vibrant radio programming. As a business partner, our listeners will know you support Savannah's only broad-based community radio station. become a tower sponsor or underwriter. To check out the levels of corporate sponsorship and to donate, go to www.wruu.org/corporate. Again, to check out the levels of corporate sponsorship and to donate, go to www.wruu.org/corporate. Thank you for listening and to supporting WRUU LP. And for those that are listening and you may have or people that are trying to listen and they're having difficulties, let them know that they can stream also by going to WRUU.org and just click on the icon that has a little microphone there, and you'll be able to stream the show also. So our guest today talked about not really being aware of differences until, much later in college, and that it really, it's also about how we self-identify. And unfortunately, people make assumptions about us by our appearances and how we look, and the assumptions about, our physical features, whether it's our nose, whether it's our lips, and it's definitely connected with our skin tone and, what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And as I mentioned before, I do plan on completing, and I encourage you to complete the implicit association test as it relates to race, black and white, but they also have an implicit association test as it relates to skin tone and what's considered to be an acceptable skin tone, and lighter as opposed to darker. You can share your story, and the best way to do that, and again, we don't put anybody on the spot, but you can email me if you have an interest in sharing your story, and we can talk about it before you actually go on the radio station, on the radio show. And you can email me at mystory@onehumannation.info. mystory@onehumannation.info. I do encourage you to go to the One Human Nation website, and that's where you can click on the implicit association test. That's where you can also watch the clips from some portions of the PBS series Race, the Power of an Illusion, as well as another documentary that talks about our prison system. I do encourage you to continue on your journey. I hope you will tune in next week as we continue talking about race and our concepts of race, our unconscious bias, and what we can do to make a difference in our community. I know it can seem overwhelming with everything that we hear about and what continues to be demonstrated in our culture, demonstrated whether it's in our cities or in our state. It's definitely demonstrated in our country that we still have a long way to go to get through a reconciliation about race and to go through a healing process. And I've been encouraged by one of the states that really has taken an aggressive role in taking down statues and making it very clear that, the viewpoint of a historian thinking that the Confederacy is not involved or it's just history and it's not a painful part of our history. I think that's just part of the process. I think it's not about trying to erase the history. It's not about trying to create a new history. It's about looking at the painful reality of our history, and it is our history. It's not a black history or a white history. It is it's not only a Native American history or an Asian American history. It's our history. And until we actually take ownership of our history, we're going to continue to have the struggles that we are currently experiencing in this country. And some of it's just denial of not really wanting to take a look at what we can do or what needs to change so we can move towards justice, more towards equality. And that's not to have an excuse for on one side of the fence or the other. It's about embracing our history and what do we need to do to take the next steps. You're listening to WRUU-LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul. As we prepare for next week, I do want to prompt you to continue listening to the next host that's coming up, which will be Troy Stoner with Sound Limits. Troy Stoner with Sound Limits will be coming up at 6 o'clock. So thanks for listening to onehumannation.info. Please visit our website at www.onehumannation.info.